Okay, hello everyone, welcome. My name is Brittany Eltringham, and I'm so glad that you are joining us today for Braiding funding for the acquisition, development, and operation of housing programs, hosted by the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence in collaboration with Safe Housing Partnerships. In this pre-recorded webinar, NRCDV partnered with Dede, Yazzie-Devine, President and CEO of Native American Connections, an organization improving the lives of individuals and families through Native American culturally appropriate behavioral health, affordable housing, and community development services. So here, our expert presenter will discuss how the braiding of both federal and long-term sustainable funding can be achieved to acquire, develop, and operate high-quality housing communities. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'd like to start by introducing the Domestic Violence and Housing Technical Assistance Consortium, which is an innovative collaborative approach to providing training, technical assistance, and resource development at this critical intersection of domestic and sexual violence, homelessness, and housing. We are funded and supported by an unprecedented partnership between the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, the Department of Justice, which includes the Office for Victims of Crime and the Office on Violence Against Women, as well as the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. This multi-year consortium brings together national, state, and local organizations with expertise on housing and domestic violence in order to collaboratively build and strengthen technical assistance to both housing and homelessness providers, as well as domestic violence and sexual violence service providers. So we are comprised of 5 TA provider organizations, which is Collaborative Solutions, the National Alliance for Safe Housing, the National Network to End Domestic Violence, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, and then the National Resource Center on Domestic Violence. And I'm a proud representative of NRCDV. NRCDV put together this animated infographic to really highlight these critical intersections of domestic and sexual violence, race, and housing insecurity. So I'd like to take a moment to go ahead and share this with you folks.
Homelessness is an issue that far too many people face. People of color, specifically Black people, other persons of color, and Indigenous people, experience homelessness in a dramatically different way than their white counterparts. People who hold multiple identities, such as those who live at the intersections of disability, immigration status, sexual orientation, gender identity, and more, experience compounded barriers that further homelessness and housing instability. A recent study found that 66% of people experiencing homelessness were Black, while 28% were white. Black individuals are only 13% of the U.S. general population, compared to 74% of those who are white. Rates of homelessness within Native communities are 3 to 8 times higher than that of the general population. In total, 78% of people experiencing homelessness identified as people of color. This overrepresentation of Indigenous, Black, and other people of color experiencing homelessness cannot be explained by poverty or identity alone. Structural racism, historical policies, institutional practices, and cultural narratives that perpetuate racial inequity put people of color at a disadvantage in obtaining safe and affordable housing. Statistically, women of color are much more likely to experience domestic and sexual violence, and survivors often face network impoverishment. Network impoverishment occurs when the addition of a financially distressed household member places an extra strain on family resources. Oftentimes, we tell a survivor experiencing homelessness to go to a relative or friend's house. However, network impoverishment can cause immense burdens on the existing limited finances and available support from that network. Racial disparities arise at every juncture, from the legal system, to housing, to healthcare, to child welfare, to public benefits. Understanding the intersections between domestic and sexual violence, racism, and homelessness, and applying an equity, survivor-centered lens in our work is the only pathway to stability, safe housing, and healing for all survivors. If we want to address racial inequity, we have to acknowledge it, learn about it, and talk about it so we can do more about it together. To learn more, visit safehousingpartnerships.org.
I'll go ahead and introduce our presenter at this time. We're so honored and fortunate to have Yazzie-Devine with us. Dede has been working with Native American, urban, and tribal entities since 1972 and has been employed as the CEO of Native American Connections since 1979 for over 40 years. NAC is a 501c3 Native American operated nonprofit corporation that provides comprehensive behavioral health and integrated medical services, affordable housing, and community-based economic development opportunities. With Native Americans as a priority population, NAC offers innovative, research-based health services integrated with Native cultural and traditional healing practices. In addition, NAC developed, owns, and operates over 1,000 units of affordable housing for working families and permanent supportive housing for homeless individuals along the light rail in Central Phoenix. NAC is also a leader in multifamily housing LEED Platinum certified building. In 2017, NAC, in partnership with the City of Phoenix and Phoenix Indian Center, renovated and reopened the Phoenix Indian School Visitor Center in order to tell the 99-year story and history of the school, ranging from 1891 to 1990. So at this time, it is my honor and pleasure to turn it over to Dede.
Thank you, Brittany. I appreciate that. And I don't see where I can advance. Okay, here we go. So thank you very much, Brittany, for that introduction. And I think that the video that we just saw really emphasizes the importance for organizations like Native American Connections and other Indigenous and culturally based organizations in really advancing their community development opportunities in order to make sure that we are providing safe, affordable housing for all of our members. So thank you for that. Native American Connections is located in Phoenix, Arizona. We're going to be 50 years old next year. And so we've been a community presence in this community for a very long time. We are co-located with several other Native American and nonprofit organizations at our American Indian Community Service Center, right at the corner of Central and Indian School in downtown Phoenix. So we're co-located with the Phoenix Indian Center, Gila River Indian Community Urban Service Center, the Tohono O'odham Tribal Community College, and several other nonprofits that are partners to making sure that our Native American community has the integrated network of partnerships that we need to really impact their lives. We were founded, Native American Connections was founded in 1972. This is a picture of our very first facility that we acquired in 1978. So we started as a organization that was serving the Indigenous population that was moving into the urban areas. Phoenix was a relocation city, which was a mid-century government strategy of assimilation of Native American people. And so you saw these small little nonprofits spring up in cities like Phoenix and Chicago and LA and Denver, Minneapolis. that were there to really support the Native community when they moved from a reservation area into an urban area. And we were the cultural and social supports. We were the connector to safe place to live, to jobs, to healthcare. And that's really the history of our organization. So in 1978, we opened our first residential substance use recovery center. And it was a 16-bed facility. And it actually provided that service for over 40 years until we moved into a new facility in 2016. But this little building right here, it was unusual for nonprofits to acquire their property back then. This would have been 40 some years ago. And it was offered to, I had just come to work there, and it was offered for us to acquire this site. And so we actually purchased this site with a dollar down and a mortgage that I was still trying to understand. But from this very site, we leveraged 23 housing and healthcare sites, and the funding that it took and the leverage that it took to actually build the continuum of care that we own and operate today. So that small building turned into a 70-bed recovery center in 2016. We use our residential substance use beds as part of our homeless housing continuum of care. We learned during COVID, there was no more stronger link made between housing and healthcare that we've learned more about over the last 18 months. That as COVID was spreading through tribal communities here in Arizona, we had two reservation communities that had some of the highest COVID infection rates, hospitalization rates, and death rates. And many times that was correlated with the lack of with the lack of housing. There is a significant housing gap, particularly in the Navajo Nation. People were living in multi-generational families and substandard sometimes housing that lacked running water, and in very small housing where it was extremely overcrowded. And so it was really part of that link between needing a safe place to isolate, to be if they were COVID positive. And so we really learned about the importance of a healthy community and housing and being safe during COVID. I do want to say that the tribal communities in Arizona now, 18 months later, are very much leading the way in vaccinations and are pilots, and to be held up and commended for how tribal leadership has really taken on COVID and put in policies and principles to be safe during that period of time. But this is our beautiful residential treatment center. It was funded through the New Market Tax Credits program, which is very common when you're looking at community-based healthcare systems. And it provides a funding mechanism that you can use and leverage with other local sources to build a healthcare center. Our 70-bed facility provides residential treatment to women, pregnant women, women with their children, and couples. And really the importance of keeping the family together in that recovery process. It's very unusual to see a substance use recovery mental health facility focus on keeping that family unit intact. And here's our childcare center at the Patina Wellness Center. Sometimes when mothers are wanting to get the help they need in recovery, they don't want to leave their children behind in maybe an unsafe place or in an unsafe relationship. And so it can be a barrier for them getting the help they need with their addiction and mental health needs. And so being able for the mother to bring her children with her into the recovery center where they're getting what they need as well, in terms of maybe having been in an unsafe environment or in an unstable relationship, they're coming in and learning safety and security and age appropriate tools, as well as the mom when they're coming in the recovery center. So the importance of really integrating national best practices for healthcare and recovery services is important, but we also know that some of the Native American traditional practices are much older than our national best practices. They're centuries old, and they have been in place for the resiliency of indigenous communities for thousands of years. And so Native American Connections actually integrates some of those traditional healing practices into the long-term supports that people need to be clean and sober and to stabilize in their mental health. So this is a sweat lodge, the Women's Lodge at our residential treatment center. And when you're constructing, when you're trying to leverage your funding for building a facility like the Patina Wellness Center, we actually do 3 budgets for all of our projects. And sometimes when we're thinking about if we could just get the facility, we'll make it work. And so people really just focus on the financing to acquire the site and then to renovate or build the site. We actually do 3 budgets. And so we have a budget that puts together the purchase and acquisition of the land to complete the construction. And then the second budget that we do is in order to operate that facility going forward. Many of our funding sources that we use have a compliance period of use, 15 to 20 years, sometimes longer. So we really have to be able to have a plan and a financing structure to operate that facility for that period of time. So now we have the budget to acquire the land and the construction of the facility. We have a budget to operate that facility, which would be your maintenance and reserves, your utilities, your insurance, your equipment, and all those things that it takes to really maintain a facility over time. And then the third budget is the service budget. How are we going to really provide the necessary services that people need to rejoin our community in a healthy way and begin giving back in their support of the community? So I put this commercial kitchen there because those of you, if you've been operating maybe a domestic violence shelter, a community-based homeless shelter, or a housing program, we never have commercial kitchens. Matter of fact, the first recovery center that we opened had a residential kitchen that we converted to a commercial one. And when we were able to really build our first commercial kitchen, it was really a success that everybody pointed to. Being able to provide healthy foods, going back to our indigenous diets, and really providing that importance of teaching people in recovery the importance of nutrition and diet. In who would have thought, but in 2020 during COVID, we actually opened 4 new programs. Not the time you wanted to open new programming during COVID, but we had 3 projects that were already in development that we had to finish. And one of them was another beautiful residential treatment center for substance use and mental health issues, which was really focused on during COVID, where we knew people were alcohol, drug addiction, opioid overdoses, mental health issues, suicide, domestic violence were all up during COVID. And so we were in construction in a new recovery center for Native American men. And that was the beautiful site that we were able to acquire. And in February of 2021, we actually opened up this new site, this new facility. And again, we use the new market tax credits. This is a licensed healthcare facility. That's a really good anchor leverage for funding for healthcare centers. We used the Federal Home Loan Bank affordable housing program, because this is a residential recovery center that it provides housing for people that are in recovery. And so again, looking at those three budgets of constructing the facility, operating the facility, and the services, the important services. In our healthcare services, that service budget is generally contracts with Indian Health Service, the tribes themselves, and predominantly Medicaid. So we're serving those populations that are Medicaid eligible and needing those types of services. And it was just a dream come true when we were able to acquire that site that was surrounded by the Phoenix Mountain Preserve, because we were able again to bring our medical facility with our national best practice for recovery to integrate them again with reconnecting to the land, those tribal connections of centering ourselves, returning to our spiritual self, connecting to the land. And this is our beautiful talking circle in our new facility, where people are sharing what's in their hearts and minds in their recovery process. And then here are the men at that recovery center in the construction of our new sweat lodge at that site. And then I just, I'll go through, talk about this just really quickly. Again, we're looking as a healthcare, we're a licensed medical facility. We have, medical services there, as well as master's level licensed therapists. We have case managers, and of course, people with lived experience and our peer supports that are working there, that are sometimes the most important connection for people in early recovery, are those that have been through recovery themselves and are now giving back and sharing their journey. And as we're integrating our medical practices and those things required for our medical licensing, again, looking at those traditional things that bring these young men that are searching for a path, a long-term path for healing and wellness, by connecting them to the drum and to the songs, and to approach that drum with a healthy mind, body, and spirit. And rather than telling young men, you're not going to be able to use drugs anymore, or you're really using that kind of that firm model of not using again, switching that to how do you want to approach this drum? How do you want to approach your children and your family? How do you want to approach your community from a healthy mind, body, and spirit? And we're using the drum to do that. And part of our housing continuum, and so we have 120 residential substance use recovery beds. Many times people are coming out of the county jail system or from the Department of Corrections and re-entering into our community. And how are they going to re-enter? Sometimes they are concerned because the reasons they were incarcerated were interrelated with their substance use and mental health issues, and they want to re-enter the community. And so they're coming, they have no place to go. They're trying to build their living skills. They're trying to find a job, and they're trying to find a safe place to live. And it makes it harder sometimes when you have a criminal justice background. So they're coming out to many times to our residential recovery center, which gives them time to really work on a sustainable housing plan. And so we have sober living and transitional housing for those people that are then coming back and moving into our community looking for work. A lot of times our sober living homes are financed with regular conventional financing. We're looking, going to a bank, looking for a loan, or we're looking at some of the some of the community-based foundations that are really looking to support our organization and their immediate housing needs. And then on the service side, this is the model where people are maybe beginning to pay some rents, which is third-party collectible income on the operation, to be able to operate the facility and to provide the necessary services. Sometimes there's Medicaid options available for this type of recovery housing. And so you're going to look at your, whether your Medicaid programs have billable code for supportive housing. You're going to look at a model in which people can pay part of their income for their rents, and then be able to save to move out to the community when they're ready to do that. We operate the only youth shelter in the county. I think Maricopa County is the second or third largest county in the United States. So the fact that Native American Connections is the only shelter provider specifically for youth 18 to 25, it's a telling that we really need to focus a lot more on the safety, the needs of our young people in our community. There are other shelters that take anyone over 18, but we have a large shelter in Central Phoenix, 500, 600 to 800 beds, and it's not really a safe place for our young people. We participated in our national survey with 4 other communities about safety for young people, this age group 18 to 25. And in 2016, we found that that young people in Phoenix within 2 days of being homeless had already been approached for some kind of trafficking, whether that was sexual trafficking, labor, but it is definitely on a place where we don't want homeless youth to spend one more day unhoused if we can help it. This facility was financed with home funds and CDBG funds, community development block grant funds, through our local city entity and through the State Department of Housing. So I'm going to say a majority of these funds came through those government sources, but anchored with foundations through our community that were interested in really having a strategy of providing a safe place for homeless youth. In our shelter, the youth actually live there, and they can remain there for 6 months and even longer if necessary. We have a commercial kitchen. They get 3 meals a day. A lot of times the shelter has people coming in during the evening time, and then they're back out into the community during the day. That's a common model in our community here. We did not want to have that model for homeless youth because we also learned in the same study that if youth are able to get a GED or even to go back and get their high school diploma, they have a lot less risk of returning to homelessness. One, it gives them a better job. it gives them some life skills and some new tools to use as they're looking at their housing stabilization and employment and things like that. So we really spend the time to make sure that our youth are getting the services and the life skills that they need, and a housing plan for when they might leave our community. We work very closely with an LGBTQ organization called 1 in 10. About 30% of our population at the shelter are represented from that community, and really making sure that they vocalize to each other and to other young people out in the community. This is a very safe, not only physically, but emotionally and mentally place that's safe for our community. We are actually in the development of looking at some of the new ARP funds that are available for expanding our footprint for homeless youth. Again, this is a 25-bed facility, and it's because it's a shelter, we're receiving emergency shelter funds from 3 different government sources through our city, through the city of Phoenix, Maricopa County, and our state Department of Economic Security. So I'm going to say a lot of the operations of this site are anchored with those sources of funding. Right next door to the shelter, we went ahead and acquired a 24-unit apartment complex. Again, putting together a mix of those same funding sources. The Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program, CDBG, and home funds, and then our foundations to acquire and renovate this 24-unit apartment complex. So here's one of the cute little studios. So when the youth are graduating from the shelter and they have found employment, they can move over to Saguaro Key, get a lease for 6 months. We want to treat them like a tenant and treat them and show them how to enter into a lease and to set up their utilities. And we call it practice housing, but we're really training the youth to learn how to use those life skills they learned in the shelter, then to have sometimes their own very first apartment, the first time they have utilities in their name. And then really recognizing the importance of the transition that they need into the marketplace. They might not earn enough from their income, but so how are we pairing some of the rental assistance funds that are available, rapid rehousing vouchers or other rental assistance dollars, where when a youth is able to transition out of Saguaro Key and they're moving into the marketplace, they're paying their fair share of the rent, or 30% of their income generally, and that there's a voucher or rental assistance to anchor the rest of their income. Phoenix became the second least affordable housing community during COVID. And so rental assistance on the operations side becomes really important in operating our programs, as well as supporting some tenant that's moving out into the marketplace. So social determinants of health have become extremely risen to the top of importance. Those of us that have been working with cultural communities for a very long time, we didn't ever provide a single service. We always knew that people came to us with a wide range of needs. And so that I think that's what community development organizations realize really well, is those broad range of social determinants and other things that make a community, an individual, a family, and community healthy, we were already looking at. And so community gardening, looking at nutrition and health some of our tribal communities here in Arizona have some of the highest diabetes and obesity rates. And so really looking at how we're returning to some of the indigenous farming and agriculture, foods and recipes and meal preparation, looking at, we have some organizations that have heritage seeds that are now looking at growing healthier foods. And so we know that how we eat and how we exercise are a very important part of health. This young man, Sam here, lost over 100 pounds, and here he's showing some of his blue corn recipes. He's from the Hopi community in northern Arizona, and really looking at that broad range of how we can improve our healthcare is part of our healthy living within our community. So we're now looking at some of our redevelopment housing in downtown Phoenix. Phoenix, again, I said, is now the second least affordable city. And so our rents in our downtown area are as much as $2,000 a month. And so NAC had actually, Native American Connections had actually acquired some land in downtown Phoenix. I'm not sure we knew the term of land banking when we acquired it, but now in retrospect, we look back and we had acquired 4 facilities, 4 pieces of land in the downtown Phoenix area. And now as we redevelop that land for housing, we're able to ensure that there's affordability for our Native American community, as well as other Black and Brown communities that want to live and work in the downtown area. So our rents here are start around $500 a month in a downtown area where rents are over $2,000 a month. So this is the beginning of our redevelopment with the low-income housing tax credit program. That's probably our anchor financing for housing development. I'll talk a little bit more about LIHTC as I talk about our affordable housing. I wanted to just say that I never show housing without showing the people that are living in it. We've become, as we become a very experienced community development organization and putting together financing tools and the way we leverage and braid our funding together, we can never forget why we're doing it. And at this particular facility, we had some grandmothers that were having to take responsibility and maybe even full custody of their grandchildren. And so they needed a very affordable place to live and the kind of support services that grandparents may need to really healthily raise their grandchildren. This is a permanent supportive housing community for our homeless population. I'm going to move on and talk a little bit more about our financing for homeless housing. So in Phoenix, when we're going into a neighborhood, we might be going into the Devonshire neighborhood, for example, where the shelter, the home-based shelter and Sawarkee are located. We came back to that same neighborhood because it's a historic Native American neighborhood. And we wanted to continue to redevelop those cultural corridors where Native American people originally lived. And so we went to the neighborhood association, we talked to them about wanting to build a homeless facility for chronic homeless individuals, for our unsheltered relatives. And how do you talk a neighborhood association into supporting that process? And it's by taking out an older trailer park, making sure that no one in the trailer park doing federal relocation so that no one becomes, without a home while you're in the development of building a new facility for the homeless population. And so this is what we built in Canto Point. It is anchored with the low-income housing tax credit program. The Arizona Department of Housing is our housing entity that administers that program. It was founded in 1986. An allocation of tax credits are awarded to each housing entity in every state each year. And those housing credits, you apply for those housing credits. If you're awarded credits, then you sell those credits as equity. We usually use the National Equity Fund has become our go-to partner for brokering our tax credits as a syndicator for those credits, and then giving us a good part of the equity that we needed to build this homeless housing community. This is probably a $11 million development. The Federal Home Loan Bank Affordable Housing Program, again, the City of Phoenix home or CDBG funds, many of the organizations that are funding intermediaries like LISC, Enterprise, Raza Development. They're also providing some of the pre-development funding that we need to get our tax credit application submitted and the land and the property under site control for that application. So that's kind of the financing tools or strategies that we use. The tax credit equity is generally about 70% of our financing, and then bringing together several of those other resources to fill the gap. When we're doing homeless housing, we really don't want any permanent debt, because our tenants are coming in generally without any income, or maybe on Social Security disability income. And so we don't really have a lot of rent income, future rent income, to service permanent debt. So we are really looking, when we're building our homeless housing communities, we're really looking to source all of the financing, at least for the construction of the site. And then when we're, so there's the first budget. What's the second budget? To operate the ongoing operations of the site. And that's usually with Section 8 vouchers, VASH or Section 8 vouchers. And so the City of Phoenix allocated through an application, an RFP process, 54 project-based Section 8 vouchers to the site, actually 44, because 10 of them are VASH vouchers for veterans. So that's the funding for the operation of the site. And the supportive services here at this site are predominantly funded through our Valley of the Sun United Way and other foundations that are supporting our projects. That is, it's 54 units, and it is permanent housing. So when someone comes to us through the HUD Continuum of Care, through the Maricopa County HUD Continuum of Care, through the coordinated entry system, they're coming in to fill out the application for the Section 8 voucher and become a resident of our facility. And again, it's permanent housing. We have many residents that have a lot of physical and mental health and substance use challenges, and this may be their home for the rest of their life. If they do have income through Social Security, SSDI, or from some other income, then they pay a copay assigned through the housing entity of no more than 30% of their income. So they're paying a fair share that they can afford, and then the Section 8 voucher is paying the rest. And we have a single point of entry. So how do we make, I'm just going to go back one slide here. How do we make this site, and I would think this would be of particular interest to domestic violence shelters and other places where people want to have particular safety, there is always a single point of entry. And I usually have a slide that shows that. We have 24/7 staff there. We're using technology with our key fob system where our residents have their own entry and exit, but other people cannot get into the facility. And then we can also tell by the key fob technology who's entered when, where, and what doors. And so I think that's a really nice safety feature. You can see that there's a lot of lighting and other things that really make this a safe place. We've positioned their mailboxes where we can see them from that front desk. And so we record every day if we've seen somebody, just in case we haven't seen somebody for a few days, and we can do a wellness and safety check if we're concerned about them. You can see some of the architectural and facility design plays into that, and just some regular safety principles that make these sites safe when you're serving a population that has come unhoused and is learning to live in this housing community. We also just, you saw the stove and things there. We have some automatic shutoffs that we can activate in case people forget to leave their stoves on, some other safety features like that. So here's another one of our housing communities for formerly homeless. And it also has some units that serve people living with HIV and AIDS. And I'm going to say it's kind of a broken record about our funding sources. Again, this was anchored with the low-income housing tax credit program, home funds, federal home loan bank, affordable housing program, and some of the community development funds that we have from some of our national community development organizations. This is 120 units here. Again, this is a single point of entry, lots of lighting, and other built-in features that make a facility of this size safe for the tenants and residents that live there. And you can see the size of this building where it's located in proximity to downtown Phoenix. Almost all of our sites are what we call in the central core of Phoenix. Phoenix is a very large metropolitan area, and we want to stay in an area where we have walkable transportation to transportation corridors and to the light rail, grocery stores, all those things that normal people want to use and consider an amenity for their life. There's actually a building behind that long structure, which is Stepping Stone. And just during COVID in September of 2020, we rebuilt a new facility on that structure and added another 42 units to this site. So again, leveraging a property that still had more capacity to build on, I think is one of Native American Connection's strengths. And again, here's another one of our permanent supportive housing for people that were formerly homeless. It's right along the light rail, so we're very active in developing, redeveloping properties along the light rail and making sure that people have easy access to transportation for medical appointments, for food and grocery, and all the other things that people want to utilize. This particular site has pretty much the same financing strategies, but also on the operations site, we have health plans, Medicaid health plans in Maricopa County, and those health plans have redevelopment requirements by Medicaid to reinvest in the community. And we have 13 units at this site where one of the medical health plans has actually used their community and reinvestment dollars to support the rental assistance of 13 units here at this site for people that are under receiving substance use and mental health services under the Medicaid system. And you can see in our development, our community spaces are really important. So not only do we have high quality construction and design for our units, but making sure that we have the community space available for life skills, for workforce development, for arts and crafts, and for those designed activities that the residents, 12-step meetings, and anything else that residents want to plan at their community. We do an awful lot of food distribution in our homeless housing communities. So we have about 400 units for formerly homeless individuals. And now I'm going to move to our affordable housing. So this is housing for people that are earning between 40, 50, and 60% of the area median income. So these are low income working individuals and families. 40, 50, and 60% of the area median income in Phoenix and Arizona is around, I'm just going to say maybe as low as $15,000 a year to maybe $40,000 a year, depending on the family size. So that's kind of the income level that our affordable housing is approaching. And so again, anchored with the low-income housing tax credits for our base financing for building affordable housing. This is Divine Legacy. It's 65 units. It does have 57 affordable units and then 8 market rate units. And so we have people that are non-low income living in our housing communities that you would never know. So if you're market rate or if you're in an affordable unit, no one knows which family is which, or which household is which, or which apartment is which. And you can see this is right along the light rail. This was opened up in 2010. And we were on the light rail as it was going into Phoenix. This was our first multifamily housing program that achieved LEED Platinum certification. And that's an environmental and energy certification that ensures that your building materials, that your appliances and your water flow and everything, they're all energy efficient and that they're clean product. And so we began after 2010, everything that NAC has built, we're making sure that it meets those qualifications, because we're ensuring that people are living in healthy, clean, built environments, and that we have appliances and utilities that are friendly to the environment, and they're also lowering the cost of utilities to our tenants. So it's kind of got a threefold of being friendly to the environment, definitely being friendly, health friendly to our residents, and actually lowering their utility costs for operations, whether we're paying for the utilities or the tenants paying for the utilities going forward. So I think as you're looking at building and making available affordable housing to your community, you're also looking at the quality of the construction and the materials that are going into your building. We do have, this is the first time we put in recyclable trash bins, just like the regular refuge bins. And on every floor, we have a recycle bin that takes the trash specifically to a recycling site. So again, that's part of our LEED certification. You can see the quality of the apartment, and so it really makes me happy. We have about 600 units of affordable housing for low-income working families. So it makes me really happy for someone to move in. Maybe they're paying $550 in rent, where an apartment complex next door might be, $1,800 to $2,000 a month. They're able to afford their utilities, and they're living in a safe, healthy environment. And they have enough income to pay their rent, but they also have enough income for their insurance and for their kids, to have maybe the internet connectivity they need for school. And, they just have that more income that they need to really stay stable in their housing, but again, to live a higher and better quality of life. If they were right on the light rail, so this is 65 units with only 48 parking spaces. And so really encouraging people, if they don't want to pay the cost, there is a transportation index that HUD has, has indicated what you can save in cost if you're not a car owner, in terms of if you're using public transportation, and it's fairly significant cost savings. And sometimes our tenants choose not to own a car and use public transportation in order to have a little bit more income to really take care of their families and buy food and medicine and things like that. And so you can see where it is in proximity to downtown Phoenix. This is about 10 years old, because I said it opened in 2010. And all these vacant lots that you see are now completely redeveloped in Phoenix. And the light rail station is right here. And that brown building next to the colorful Divine Legacy, that's our office building. And so again, and then right across the street from here, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, is the former Phoenix Indian School. There was a boarding school here in Phoenix for 99 years, from 1891 to 1990. Why Indian School Road is called Indian School Road. We have people that have lived their whole life in Phoenix and don't know why Indian School Road is why it's called that. And it's because there was a federal boarding school there for 99 years. And that's the neighborhood and the corridor that we're trying to preserve affordability for our Native American community in Phoenix. Here's urban living on 2nd. This is actually in the heart of downtown Phoenix. Same kind of financing sources. I can't think of anything really different that we utilize at this site. I might think of that as I'm thinking, because it's a real urban development in the heart of downtown Phoenix. Again, making sure that we're preserving affordability and for our service industry workers. So in Phoenix, you have people that are working in our restaurants and our hotels and our sports venues and our arts venues, and they want to live downtown too. They want to live close to their job, maybe even walk to their job, go to good schools, appreciate the same amenities that other people like in the downtown area. And again, keeping our rents from maybe starting in the $500 a month really allows our workforce community to live and work and enjoy the same amenities that anybody else would in the downtown Phoenix area. And again, you can see our commitment to living spaces. We partner with numerous organizations to make sure that our residents, it's also part of our funding strategy, is to not do anything that another nonprofit organization does well or better as their core mission. And so every day our local food bank, St. Mary's Food Bank, delivers a kids cafe meal. So in our 600 affordable housing units every child is coming home from school and getting a meal when they return. And we partner with other organizations like Future for Kids, other organizations that are providing after-school tutoring and safe places for our kids. So our parents who might not be able to afford childcare, which we know is an increasing problem across the country, they have after-school safety programs for the kids until their parents get home from work in these community spaces. Maybe they're getting help with their tutoring and other activities that they need. So here's one of our projects that you can see where it is in relationship right across the street from that other project I just showed you. And this is called Urban Living on Fillmore. And you can see its scale in its proximity to downtown Phoenix. It's also right across the street from ASU downtown. Having access for higher education as well. And then here's the project that's now finished and open and operational. Cedar Crossing, this is right near, this is on the same property as our healthcare center. So we actually have two housing communities. One was a homeless housing community on our men's residential and mental health substance use center. And this is affordable housing on the same center as the Patina Wellness Center on the same lot. So by acquiring one site, acquiring the land, and then doing legal lot splits and developing the program under single entities with different funding sources, because one's healthcare and one's housing, allows us to leverage the cost of land, though, by acquiring maybe a little bit larger site and then splitting it legally, and then developing with healthcare funds and then with housing funds, which help us leverage those funds to develop the campus in total. So you can see those courtyard communities. We used an organization called Kaboom, a national organization that organizes a local benefactor and local volunteers to come in a self-designed playground space and actually create that space within about 3 days. So the community itself, the residents and the children, get to design the play space, and then Kaboom comes in with the local financing and the volunteers to help with putting those spaces in place. And then there's a little bike giveaway, bike safety classes and helmets. They had to get a helmet and pass the little bike safety class and then get a free bike. Here's some housing for seniors. This was the redevelopment of a site that was both new construction and renovation. We used some preservation, housing preservation dollars to preserve some of the older spaces, and then new low-income housing tax credits to create the new construction. We partner with AARP, with Hospice of the Valley, with lots of other organizations that help and provide some of the medical services and some of the food donation and just some of the social activities that our seniors need in their communities. So again, that service budget is from our community partners that provide those services and need a place to provide them. And so our seniors welcome outside partners coming in and providing some of the much needed services. Another senior community, Landmark Senior Living. This site actually has a beauty salon, and we have several local beauty salons that come in and provide beauty services to our residents. One of the things I'd like to say at this site is that when we were raising the funds for the construction of this site, for the initial development of this site, we also raised additional funds for rental assistance. So we capitalized and structured our own internal rental assistance program. We worked with the local community to determine what the average income of a retired senior. And then we realized that they weren't going to be able to pay the full rent that we needed to charge to operate this site. That they could maybe pay what we've been talking about, maybe the $500 to $600 a month. But if the rents really needed to be, in the $750 range, because we have some permanent debt on this site and the rents were just structured a little bit higher, then we had our own rental assistance to fill that gap for the tenant. And so all of our units have an internal fund in order to provide the rental assistance gap to make it affordable to them. We do some development with other nonprofit partners. This is a project that we acted as the developer. We put the financing together and did the construction as a partner to another nonprofit in our community. And they own and operate this site. Our role in this site was just the developer and the construction. And then I was alluding to it earlier that in Phoenix had a boarding school that opened in 1891 and was open for 99 years and did not close until 1990. And when it closed, the Department of Interior did a real estate transaction with a real estate company in Florida, who then later did a real estate transaction with the city of Phoenix. And it became a city park called Steele Indian School Park. And then the city operated as a park with complete disconnection from its original purpose and with a connection to the American Indian, Native American community in Phoenix. So about 10 years ago, the Phoenix Indian Center and Native American Connections approached the city of Phoenix as a community development organization and said we wanted to reopen one of the historic buildings. When the school closed in 1990, there were 27 buildings on the school property, and the city demoed all of them except for 3 that were on the historic register. And this was the original elementary school. This building was built in the 1930s, and we approached the city and said, we want to take over this building, we'll renovate it, re-renovate it, and we want to tell the 99-year truthful history of the boarding school experience. And so we now operate this site. It's still owned by the city, but we operate this site. And this is a picture of the children from the 1950s standing right in front of that elementary school, telling their stories and being able to tell the difficult stories when necessary to really understand the historical trauma and the significance of the boarding school experience with Native American people. And we used historic preservation dollars, community development block grant funds through the city of Phoenix, through the state of Arizona to renovate and bring this site back to where we could open it and open the gallery there. And then Native American Connections, we, as a community development organization, we're part of about 30 organizations that every fall during National Native American Indian Recognition Day, and when we're celebrating a lot of events in the Native community, we have a parade every year in October, on the second Saturday of October, as part of Native American Recognition Days in the Phoenix area. And it kind of anchors how we feel about our community, that every person is valued, every person is important, every person has an opportunity to be healthy, safe, live in a safe place that they can afford, have a meaningful work that has a livable wage, and as each person that we touch and begins to strengthen their skills and their ability to take care of themselves and then take care of their families, and then reaching out and taking care of their community. So that's kind of how I feel community development organizations work. So I hope I gave you some things to think about, some ways to think about how you don't need to just wait for one grant source of funding to try to acquire and develop and operate your facility, but look at many sources that are available to you. As one source opens, you can ask each person that you're working with, are there other sources of funds that pair up with these, or you can leverage them. Some of the things that we talk about in our organization are good debt and bad debt that we've learned as a nonprofit organization. There can be really good debt, and that's debt that's affordable and easy to service with the income and revenue of your project, and then bad debt when the source of financing is too high and you don't have the income generated from your programs to really pay that debt. So we've learned to really use and leverage our current resources to even grow and expand and acquire other sites and develop other programs as the urban Indian population is growing all throughout America. So I hope I've given you some tools to utilize and to think about. And I really appreciate you having me today. Thank you. And I'll turn it back to Brittany.
Thank you so much, Dede. You are absolutely, you carry a wealth of knowledge, and I just want to thank folks who have taken the time to view this presentation. Dede, we want to thank you for your time and your energy and your work with us today. For those viewing, we hope you were able to take something with you. If you have resources that relate to this presentation, or if there's a topic that you would like a future training or presentation on in the future, please share in the comments below. You can find more information and links to resources for the webinar in the description. And as always, you can like and subscribe to our channel, or visit us at our website. If you have any questions, please visit us at safehousingpartnerships.org/contact. And thank you so much.